We'll be starting the first share in Hilchos קידושין, which some of you have learned, hopefully all of you have learned. We'll go through some of the points that are relevant. סימן Chavav, a little bit in the beginning of סימן Chav Zayin. Hilchos קידושין begin with סימן Chavav. That's the opening Siman of Hilchos קידושין. Sif Aleph gives you the rule that you have to know. For a woman to become an Eishes Ish, they have to have קידושין. If a person was with a woman l'shem nose, it's not קידושין. And if he ba'aleh l'shem ishus, but there was no edim, the Mechaber over here writes that it's nothing. And if you look in the Beis Shmuel, he points out to you right away that in Siman Kuf Mem Tes, it's mashma that if he married her in a form that it's golui lakoil, everybody knows that it's for the purpose of marriage, then there was bia, it's considered like a day bia. And therefore the Beis Shmuel over here explains that if it was clear, golui, that the reason he married her was l'shem ishus, then it's considered the bia is considered קידושין. And there is somewhat of a stira between the Beis Shmuel here and the Beis Shmuel and Siman Kuf Mem Tes, and there are achreinim which deal with it, and they explain that what the Beis Shmuel is trying to say is that if it's clear to everyone that his plan is to marry her with chuppah v'kiddushin, then if he was boil l'shem kiddushin, then it's considered like mekadosh b'biyah, and therefore she's considered married. This is one of the pointers that are relevant to the whole discussion of civil marriages, reform marriages, conservative marriages that we discussed in the past. And just in short, that there is a yesoidus dika machlekes if what's the gather of civil marriages. The Rogachover and others took the approach that civil marriages, being that ultimately the purpose of the people is to get married and to live a married life, so it is considered the be'ilas that happen afterwards are not l'shem znus, and it's yodua that the purpose is for marriage, and therefore it's considered a marriage. You have the other extreme that say that if there was no chuppah, then it's completely not considered a marriage whatsoever, and that same would apply to reform and conservative marriages, because the purpose is marriage. It's not a ceremony of just picking up a friend. It's a friend for long-term friendship. It's marriage. That's the purpose of it. And the way it's today, the majority of poskim take the approach of Moshe Feinstein, which is that it's not considered a marriage for all practical purposes. However, we do try to get a get in any possible way, and yes, for Mamzeh, this will be a different discussion, which we discussed in the previous shiurim in the beginning of the year. But when it comes to קידושין, we will definitely try to make a get in every scenario, whether it's civil marriage or it's reform marriage or it's a conservative marriage, because fart you have a suffix and you don't want to be moitzi isha l'shuk. Not only that, gittin were made even when the woman is not only, or the man, not only it was a conservative marriage, one of them was also a conservative ger, or a reform marriage, or reform ger, because if the ger, it's not really relevant to these halachas, but if a ger had in mind to be makabel teiro mitzvahs, whatever he knows, even though he didn't do a full kabbalas teiro mitzvahs because he wasn't taught, so we don't want to just say, okay, go and without a get. If they come for a get, we will encourage them to have a get. That is essentially the idea behind it. I did mention in the past the tshuva of the Tzemach Tzedek regarding a pelegish, and from that you can medayek that the Tzemach Tzedek might hold Pelegish, Tzemach Tzedek is machmer that Pelegish does require a get. It's also discussed here further. The Mechaber continues in this Seif Aleph that if he was meyached a woman specifically for him, she is still not considered his wife. And the Ramah right away points out, why is she not considered his wife? Because she's embarrassed to go to mikveh for his sake. But if she will go to mikveh for his sake and he was meyached her, then some people say it's mutter and she's considered a pelegish, and some people say she's a suraloi. But anyways, we already, and the whole discussion whether a pelegish needs a get or not, Tzemach Tzedek is machmer on that. We discussed it also previous shiurim, that Tzemach Tzedek is machmer on that she does need a get. She does need a get from him, and if the same logic over there, because of yichdaloi, that would same thing would apply to civil marriages, reform marriages, conservative marriages. That ultimately, if the purpose of marriage by these people is for the purpose of marriage and yichdaloi, then you would l'chatchila definitely try to get a get if they get divorced. The Ramah continues, if a goy marries a goya, or a mummer that marries a mumeres, and then the goy that married the goya converts, both convert, even if they lived together quite a few years before the conversion, there's no chashash קידושין, and she is mutter without a get. Obviously, the Atzei Arazim points out, and the Dogel Mervava also in Hilchos Geirus, that if he wants to continue living with her, he has to do a chuppah v'kiddushin. What's the reason why there is no chashash kiddushin over here? If by a mummer to a mumeres, or a goy to a goya, or something along those lines, you look in the Biur Agra, it's one of the longer Biur Agra that you'll find, and he says because the words that were used when the mummer married the mumeres by the priest was not words of Kiddushin. We'll learn in Chav Zayin that there has to be a lashon of Kiddushin, and there was no giving of a ring from him to her. Rather, HaKoymer Nosan Lohem Lekol Echad Tabas, the priest gives each one of them a ring. And then, if there is this kind of non-Jewish ceremony, and afterwards there is Eidei Yichud, we don't say Hein Hein Eidei Yichud, Hein Hein Eidei Bia. Why? Because the only time we say Hein Hein Eidei Yichud, Hein Hein Eidei Bia, the Gemara explains, is only when we have a Chashash Kiddushin. Because then we say that the only reason he was boil, his Misiach was boil, was al das Kiddushin Rishonim. Over here, there was no Kiddushin Rishonim to begin with. The Baal was not al das Kiddushin, and therefore the Eidei Yichud are not Hein Eidei Yichud, Hein Eidei Bia, for the purpose of confirming that there was here a Kiddushin. Now, we mentioned a mummer and a mumeres. The Chalkas Mechaykek and Sifkat and Gimel right away points out that this only applies to somebody who became a mummer from his own free will and accord. Because then we say, probably if a mummer became a mummer from his own free will and accord, and the mumeres also, then we say they also, if they went all the way out of Judaism, they went all the way out of standard, basic human practice, and they also, their be'ilas are considered be'ilas nus. But if they are anusei hazman, the Chalkas Mechaykek points out, it means they did not become a mummer because they chose to become mumarim, they chose to become Christians and to marry by a priest, but because they were anusim. So then, if we know that they kept Torah mitzvahs in hiding, and they married for the purpose of marriage, even though the marriage was done in a civil way, he says it's very hard to say that this marriage will be considered nothing. And if they're careful with Taras HaMishpacha, for sure not. and lemaise ein lahakol. He says it can't be mekel and isur eishes ish, which is a chamur dike isur.
According to the view we had mentioned before, how would that fit in with civil marriage? Where, like, is that the same as civil marriage?
Pretty much.
So it's not.
That's what it seems like. That's why I brought him up. So I mentioned him. Because of his lashon, of how he describes the priestly marriage.
It's not because it's missing chuppah, it's simply because
There's no קידושין, and there is an alternative ceremony, which is a contradiction to קידושין. קידושין is defined in Siman Chav Zayin. It's different rules. He tells her, he gives her something. A marriage ceremony, which is him and her giving each other, it becomes a partnership. Or him and her telling each other is not קידושין. I'm just going to go through another point. In Sif Gimel of Siman Chavav is another important rule that's relevant to קידושין, and that is that we all know it because we know the basics, that from the moment there's קידושין, she is considered an eishes ish, and obviously she would need a get to become muteres l'shuk. Sif Dalet says, meaning that you could be mekadesh bekesef, shtar, and bia. Chachamim said that you're not allowed to be mekadesh bebia because of pritzes, and if you're mekadesh bebia, they give you makas mardos. And just an interesting thing, you look at the lashon of Shulchan Aruch, is makinoisoi, not makinoiso, makinoisom. Only he gets klap, and not he gets makas mardos, and not her. And there's a bunch of reasons given to it, but the simplest reason is the way we define קידושין is him doing an action. So he is the one who did an action. She's a passive participant in this being over in Takanas Chachamim. Therefore, she does not get makas mardos. Only he gets makas mardos. That is essentially the opening of Hilchos קידושין. What is considered what makes a woman a eishes ish. The details of קידושין start in Siman Chav Zayin. Hold on a second. Start in Siman Chav Zayin. In Siman Chav Zayin, we know, because now we already have the introduction, that קידושין, the way it's done, it's only with money or something which is worth money. So Siman Chav Zayin discusses how this is done. Now, just in general, the way you usually go shiurim over here is I went in Even Ezer, I usually go through all in short, the details that are relevant, and go through the different points from Achronim, just Lamaisa, and the Kudas, Machlekes, that are relevant to the Siman. I'm going to focus mainly on Seif Aleph. So I'll give you a bunch of Mekaymas as I mention them. I'll give you the lashon of the Mechaber and the lashon of the Ramah in Siman Chav Zayin Seif Aleph, which gives you all the first rules of קידושין. Bekesef Keitzad, how is it done with? I'm first going to read it. How do you do קידושין bekesef? Because now we know it's bekesef. Noisen law, he gives her bifnei shnayim in front of two edim. Pruta, yeshava pruta, a coin that's pruta or something which is worth a pruta. Ve'omer law, and he tells her, Harei at mekudeshes li bozeh. You are mekudesh to me with this. That's the mechaber that Ramah adds. V'yashem yishlomer lo kedas Moshe beYisrael. You have to say kedas Moshe beYisrael. V'chein negin lechatchila. That's how we do it. V'chein also negin lekadosh betabas. The minig is to be mekadosh betabas. V'yesh lem tam betikunei hazoyer, and it has a reason in tikunei hazoyer. One of the not many places that the Ramah points out to you in the halacha, the minig, which is based al pi Kabbalah. V'hu hadin, the mechaber continues, Imam lo areit mureses li, or areit li leisha, you're mureses, you're arusa, or you are my wife. V'chein b'chol lashon shemashmus lashon קידושין, v'adai b'isamakim, any other form of words which imply that he is marrying her, taking her as a wife in this location, ubilvat shehi tovin shehu lashon קידושין, as long as she understands that these words that he is saying is a lashon of קידושין, and not something else. Now, this is just a important point there. You have a proposal, will you marry me, is not I am marrying you now. It's something that will happen in the future. A commitment or any of these things are, even though we are machmer, the Rebbe once said not to give rings for this reason during engagement, but I'm saying the lashon of the lashonis has to be a very clear lashon that implies that she is mekudesh to him. The word mekudeshes means she is. I mentioned there's two parts in Kiddushin. There is that she is no longer permitted to the rest of the world, and that she is only mekudeshes designated for him. That is Kiddushin. So if there's any other lashon in any other place which implies that same idea clearly and she understands, then she is mekudeshes. And if he was talking with her, he was talking about doing Kiddushin, v'nosan la, and he gave her the pruta or shava pruta or the ring or whatever it is, have a Kiddushin, is considered Kiddushin. V'hu shadayin asukim ba'isayinin, as long as they're still busy discussing this matter of Kiddushin. V'kol shekenim omar loshin Kiddushin, v'aday eloshenam evino, he said have a Kiddushin. How much more so if he says a loshin Kiddushin, but she does not understand the loshin Kiddushin, it's also considered a Kiddushin, and the Rama says that you don't have to be medabrin by se'inyan, ela mamash al midvonim inyan by se'inyan, as long as you're passing from topic to topic within the same topic, it's all connected to the wedding. Then if he gives her money, or he gives her a ring or whatever it is considered Kiddushin. What does mean by se'inyan? Dahainu she'en medabrin by Kiddushin rak betzorchei zivugam. They're not talking about about the actual Kiddushin. Kiddushin means putting the ring and saying Gared Mekudeshesli. They're talking about betzorchei zivugam and other things connected to the marriage, which could be a nedunya. He's asking her how much money is she's bringing in, how much money he's bringing in, whatever it is that's connected to it. Some people even more machmed leibinu medabrim ima. As long as they're talking in front of her, that is enough. So let's just go and dissect what this mechaber is telling us over here.
Just for a second,
Yeah.
saying, will you marry me? Why is that not, with pashtus in America?
It's a hefech of Kiddushin.
The lashon in English is mashma Kiddushin.
No.
Most women understand it as Kiddushin.
They don't.
And at least it could be like...
Fakert, the minhag is, will you marry me, is a proposal, will you down the line marry me? Will you?
This is Kiddushin for that Nisuin.
Yeah, but it's only if she says to him, will you marry me? Maybe.
Why?
Because will you marry me, are you going to be Mekadesh me? If he asks her, are you going to be Mekadesh me, it's nothing.
In this language, this word means Kiddushin. Right now we are engaged to be married. The marriage is not happening now, but we're engaged to be married.
We're
And
engaged.
there's also one of the, I don't know the exact lashon, which is basically calling her Isha, which is more lashon of marriage.
Yeah.
It's not so much that it doesn't mean anything. If there is
Something, yeah.
that could be Kiddushin.
Right. If he says, do you agree that I shall marry you? Then it might be a big problem. Could become a problem. Not when it's reversed.
Because
It's fakert of Kiddushin, yeah. The woman is not marrying the man is marrying the woman. She has to be maskim, but... So let's go through it. He says he gives him a pruta or a shava pruta bifnei shnei edim. That's the first thing that is done. How is this done? Okay, we know the minhag is tabas. The Bar Heitev brings in the name of the Maril. The first thing that Rav does, he calls the edim, that they should look at the ring and they should check if it's shava. Should check if it's shava pruto. The Bar Heitev then continues and brings to the Mara Mintz that also you show that the ring to the edim, and you tell them that they have to see the giving of the ring to the woman. That is noisen la b'fnei shnei edim. The Ben Ish Chai says that something which that the Kala has to see the Chassan is mekadesh, and she has to pay attention, and she has to be mechaven to be miskadeshes. Now the Bar Heitev continues in the name of the Maram Mintz. When a man is mekadesh, he uses his right hand to put the ring, and you put it on the index finger of her right hand. And obviously, if it's a lefty or she's a lefty, then he uses his left hand, which is Yomin Shaloi, and she uses her left hand. The Knesset Agdola points out something very interesting, that the reason why they put it on the index finger is because that was the custom back in the day, that everybody wore the ring on the index finger. However, we are not going to change, because God says we are not going to change the minhag, and even though already in the Knesset Agdola's days the ring was not worn on that finger, we don't change the minhag and we continue putting it on that finger. The Pischei Tshuva brings in the name of Kerem Shloimeh. There should not be a chatzitza, and therefore she should remove any gloves that she's wearing, and she remove the gloves she's wearing. The Aruch HaShulchan in Sif Dalet says this is only a hidur and a siman bracha. It's not ma'akev, and it's interesting that you have in Shuvah Shalom, he says that Bichlal, this whole Yesod of Chatzitza in קידושין is not relevant, because the whole din of Chatzitza in קידושין, the Chatzitza isn't by a get. By a get it says V'nosan beyoda. By קידושין it does not say V'nosan beyoda, and therefore there is no din of Chatzitza in a get. The Shulchan HaEzer says, based if there's a siman bracha by her taking off, according to the Aruch HaShulchan, by her taking off the gloves, if he's wearing gloves, he should also take off the gloves for the same siman bracha. The Beis Shmuel in Sifkot and Aleph, right away in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, says that if he is mekadesh with something which is mechuber lakarka, and now it has to be removed from the karka, she is considered mekudeshes. And the Maharit, right away, the Maharit explains, the reason for it is quite simply because, again, even though Kiddushin and Gittin are compared one to another, the restrictions on Gittin, which is v'nosan biyado v'kosav v'nosan biyado, that there can't be any separation between the v'kosav and v'nosan, it doesn't apply by Kiddushin of a ring or something else of value. If anything, it will only apply by Kiddushin of a shtar, and even then, there's no v'nosan beyoda, there's no din of v'nosan beyoda in Kiddushin. The Beis Shmuel says, also continues, if he's mekadesh bekarka, she can't even pick it up. He's mekadesh bekarka, she's mekudeshes. The Rosh Pina on Even HaEzer points out over there that just a thing, how does she actually acquire the karka? When you give her a tree, one thing, when you give her a ring, she takes it. How does she acquire karka? He says that he has to give her a shtar that she owns the karka, or he tells her that she should do some action of chazaka in the karka, so that way she should be considered that she is zoiche in it. But if he just tells her his ared mekudesh zi bekarka zu, and there's no shtar and there's no action which she could acquire the karka, the Rosh Pina says that even the Beis Shmuel would agree that it is not considered kiddushin. The Mechaber continues after he says noisin lo b'fnei shnei edim, noisin lo pruto shav pruto b'fnei shnei edim, and says ve'omer hareyot mekudeshes bozeh, or Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, like the Rama says the minhag is. The Tzitz Eliezer, Chelik Beis, Siman Yutes, there's a long tshuva, but he points out over there that from the Lashon of the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch that says Noisen Lo Pruto Bifnei Shnei Edim and then Ve'omer, it's mashma that the Eidim don't have to hear the words Harei at Mekudeshes Li. All they have to do is they only have to see the Nesinas HaTabas. That's the Maaseh HaKiddushin. Because Kiddushin is done via the action, not only the words. The words is only a Gilui Milse. What was the giving for? If he gave her money and he didn't say anything, we don't know what the money was given for. Maybe he owes her money. If he says Harei at Mekudeshes, it's a Gilui Milse. But the action that the Eidim have to see is the giving. That's the mashmos of the Mechaber. The Maram Mintz in Siman Kuftes says that the Amira, the saying Harei at Mekudeshes Li, also has to be done in front of Eidim, and he says that is the minhag. Now the Mechaber says he gives her a pruta or a shove pruta. When you say pruta, obviously it means a coin. The Beis Shmuel says over here that a coin is only b'di'evet, but not l'chatchila. And if you look in the Beis Shmuel Madura Kama, he takes it even further, that it only works mid'eraisa, and mid'rabanan a matbeya is only b'di'evet fine. But everybody disagrees with him. The Aruch HaShulchan, the Avnei Miluim. There's stories in the Tzemach Tzedek. You could see in Shas Tzemach Tzedek. You see the same thing. It's pretty clear that the pruta, that being mekadosh with a matbeya is not a problem, even lechatchila. And the Avnei Miluim, I think, mentions that they were actually noyeg that way in certain places. The dafka to be mekadosh matbeya, if they were not mekadosh with a ring. Another point from the lashon of the Mechaber, it says noisen lo b'fnei shnei eidim, and then ve'omer, which means that first he gives, and then he says. It would imply that if he gives it to her first and only afterwards he says it, it will still work. All the Achronim understand that it doesn't mean that way. It means that while you give it to her, you say it. I'm soon going to see a very interesting truth from the Tzemach Tzedek about specifically this topic. The words that he uses, Harei at Mekudeshes Li. What happens if he doesn't say Harei? He just says at Mekudeshes Li. The Tashbitz, Chelek Aleph Siman Chav Gimel says that it's not considered Kiddushin. Because at Mekudeshes Li sounds like a story. It's not saying Harei, behold, at Mekudeshes Li, you're becoming Mekudesh to me with this tabas. At Mekudeshes Li, you're Mekudesh to me. Could be a story, not a statement of an action. But the Sefer HaMakna says that she's Sofek Mekudeshes if he doesn't say Harei. If he doesn't say Harei at, if he doesn't say at, he just says Harei Mekudeshes Li, he skips the word at, doesn't say you. The Maharit in Chelek Aleph Kuf Lamed Ches, the Chasam Sofer, the Maria Levi, and a bunch of other Achronim all say that she is not Mekudeshes. If he says Harei at Mekudeshes betaba zu, doesn't say Mekudeshes Li, that will be discussed in Seif Daled, in this Siman. If he says Harei at Li, without saying Mekudeshes Li, he says, behold, you are for me with this ring, the Rabbi Kiva Eger in Tanyana Siman Nun Gimel says that is a Lashon Kiddushin, even if he does not say Mekudeshes, by the mere fact that you are for me, is already. Now, I want to point out a few interesting things from Shas Tshuvos and Tzemach Tzedek. There is Tshuvos Tzemach Tzedek is about 200 pages of Tshuvos connected to Hilchos Kiddushin. I am not going to go through all of them now, and I will just point out nekudas from certain Tshuvos that I found interesting. First, we'll start with a Tshuva which shows on the exciting life in the shtetl back in the day. This was in one of the villages in Ukraine called Yazir. It was also called Israelovka. It was known as a Jewish village. A guy comes to Bezdin and says, I was Mekadesh, a Besula, during a wedding party in front of 3 Eidim. And she says, never happened. He brought 3 Eidim to Bezdin. He tells the Bezdin 3 Eidim. Only 2 of them showed up the first time to Bezdin. and the third one was not available, so the Bezdin didn't do Chakira Drisha. A few days later, the Bezdin was able to track the third one down. They called all three back to Bezdin to do a Chakira Udrisha. And they started grilling them. One of them says, Bichal didn't see anything. One of them says it was dark, it was squishy, couldn't see if he actually put the coin in her hand. Only that he thinks that that's what happened, because before the action, he saw a coin in the Bacher's hand. And a short time afterwards, this boy called the girl out and told her, I was Mekadosh you. And therefore, the first aid thinks that she was probably a Kiddushin. Also, he didn't properly hear what the Bacher was saying. A lot of noise, it was the music, whatever it was. And he only heard the words, B'matbei azu, Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. The second one says that he gave her a coin so she should dance with him. Yeah, and that's what he told her. And the only reason he told her that, he says, I'll give you a coin so you can come dance with me over here in the party. And he told before that this is part of the plan. He wants to trick her. He'll tell her it's for dancing, and then he will say, Harei at Mekudeshes. And afterwards, he called her out, told her, I'm giving you a coin so you can come dance with me inside in the party. And then when he came inside, he heard that she said, Harei Mekudeshes b'matbei Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, but he did not see the giving of the coin. And then afterwards, he saw a coin in her hand, and he thinks that it was for that. He also says that the boy was a little bit embarrassed from giving the coin over there in front of everybody, so he gave it, he stuck it under, I'll just read you the Lashon over here, where he put the coin. This is סימן Tzaddik in העזר. It's the first tshuva. He says, לא היה אפשר לראות שמניח המטבע תוך ידו, רק ראה שיוסף שלשל ידו למטה עם this coin over here, עם הגריבנה כסף, מפני שהיה בוי שליטן לו בפני אנשים, על כן נוסן unterweilig, ושאלו ממנו חת ידע שזה מטבע. He didn't do it in such a public way that they were able to see, that the aide was able to see that the coin was given, and he saw a coin in her hand, and he thinks that that's it. There's a long tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek. It's actually more than one tshuva in a row on this topic. It's 3 tshuvas in a row. Tzemach Tzedek first goes and says, B'chlal, you don't need Risha v'chkira when it comes to Kiddushin. It's not one of the requirements. So why is it you need Risha v'chkira? And first, in B'chlal he says, I'm just pointing out other nekudas that he's doing before I'm going to get to the point I want to bring out. B'chlal you should be mevatel the Eidim, because the Eidim were Amei Ha'aretz, Kali Hadas, one of them is Mechal Shabbos, and he's pasul min atayra, and maybe edus about the miktsasa about lakula, but that he puts that as a tzarich. And from ois tes weiter, he explains why there is no kiddushin at all. Why? Because the edim did not see the nesina. That is what it is. And if you'd say they would be hearing all the words that Ayat Mekudeshesli clearly, maybe that would be enough to say that she's Mekudeshes if she will admit that she wanted to be Mekudeshes. But over here, she clearly says, I was not interested in being Niskadish. And now, even if you're going to say that she did receive the coins, and maybe that is a raya, we're going to be able to prove that she received the coin, still, there was a lot of noise over there. There's a lot of balagan. Maybe is mitpnei sheloi shoma loshin kiddushin. She didn't hear this mekadesh. Her whole kavana was she's getting the coin to go dance with him. So either she didn't receive the coin, like because the Eidim didn't see it, or if she did receive the coin, the purpose of the coin was for dancing and not for kiddushin. And b'chlal, she's saying she never received the coin. And she has a cheskas pnuya, so therefore he is matir. That's in tzaddik. Then there's tzaddik aleph and there's tzaddik beis. All three about the same story.
If the woman would have agreed to the kiddushin, then what?
and two Eidim would have heard Harayat Mekudeshes Li b'matbeh zu without seeing it, then it would work. But now she's denying it. The Eidim are not sure that they heard it fully, and she herself, lav dafka, she heard it, and she had in mind, she didn't hear it, probably had in mind she's getting it for the dancing with the guy. So there's nothing here. Now in the end of Siman Tzadik Beis, he does point out that Tzemach Tzedek, that one of the two Eidim didn't hear the words li, only heard the matbei azuk, that's Moshe Yisrael, so you only have one Eidus. So therefore, it's not even a suffix Kiddushin, it's nothing. And if he didn't hear it, one of the Eidim which was standing right there, lav dafka, she even heard it. And especially since she was told outside that she's getting the coin for the purpose of dancing. And he says, the Machzedek concludes, Im kein harei yesh levatel ha-Kiddushin, afilu hoyu royim anesinim, mishum shloi hoyu shum amira kedevoi. Not a proper amira of Harayat Mekudeshes in front of Eidim the way it's supposed to be. Another interesting story in the Tzemach Tzedek, this is in Siman Tzadik Gimel. Boys and girls were playing, and teenagers, and one girl grabbed a coin from one of the boys, and she gave it back to him. And then he gave it to her, and he says, "Take it." And then he asked for the coin back, and she didn't want to give it back. So he says, "If you're not going to give me back the coin, welch sagen." He didn't say what. Welch sagen. And she, part of the game, didn't give it back to him. So he says, Harayat Mekudeshes Li. And the Eidim who were there say, Mekudeshes. And once she heard Mekudeshes, she right away threw the coin back at him. So now the question is, was this, was it connected one to another? She was quiet after she received the coin. She was quiet after he said Harayat Mekudeshes Li. She only threw the coin back after the Eidim started announcing Mekudeshes as part of the thing, the other boys in the game over there. And that's what the Tzemach Tzedek starts with. The first question the Tzemach Tzedek deals with is, if being quiet after receiving something, shsika, is considered like an act that shows that she's accepting the Kiddushin or not. And Ois Hey, he explains, Shtikul Achar Matamois. If what? Isn't what?
Where's the Shai we can start with?
That what? Then?
So it's Lakum.
Yeah, but the question is over here in Kiddushin, and no Kiddushin does she say anything. The fact is she didn't say no right away.
Is it because he said Belazonian?
Yeah, and then he said Harayat Mekudeshes. And she only threw the coin back after the Eidim said Mekudeshes. So, is her being quiet in such a scenario considered that she's showing that she is ready to, that she's nisratzes to be Mekudeshes? So he says that maybe the shsika is obviously not considered enough to be a maaseh, but the fact that she was asked for the money and she decided to hold it back, maybe that is considered a maaseh. And he says no. Why? Tzemach says no. Why? Because what did he say? He said, if you're not going to give it back to me, welch sagen. He didn't say what he's going to say. And maybe she wasn't the brightest girl. The fact is, she's playing with these kind of guys. And she thought it was a joke. And then Tzemach Tzedek says, even according to the opinions which hold, that if he gives something, and teich kedei dibur, he says, Harayat Mekudeshes, and she was quiet. Over here, that will not be enough to do it. And one of the reasons he brings is really in this tshuva of Siman Tzadik Gimel, that he gave it to her, And then, first he gave it to her. Then he says, give it back to me, or will ich sagen. Then she was quiet. Then he said, so you have a bunch of hefseks over here. So you can't really connect the nesina that he gave her milchatchila to the kiddushin. So so you have a problem of tech kedei dibur. Yeah, if you would say it right away, there's no tech kedei dibur anymore. There is a gap over here. And even if you were to say that being quiet after kiddushin, that is the proof that she is willing to be, that she wants to be miskadeshes, it's still not enough of a proof. Why? Because over here, she maybe thought that she could change her mind afterwards. She thought the whole thing was a game. And he continues, and he says, Gimel, if he gave it to her and he waited tech kedei dibur, and then he said mekudeshes, and then she was quiet afterwards, it's still not considered a proof that she agreed to be miskadesh. The only way it will be is if he gave her the money. Tech kedei dibur, he said hiskachi, then there is what to talk about. There's a shaila. And even then, the fact that she threw it from her hands right after the Eidim said mekudeshes shows that she is not maskim. She's not maskim, and she's not mekudeshes. That is in Siman Tzadik Gimel. Now, this is just because we're discussing how kiddushin are done. The tshuva in Siman Tzadik Ches. I'm not going to go into the tshuva right now. I'm just going to go to the end in the first paragraph of Ois Tes in Siman Tzadik Ches. And there's a bunch of shilas on that one. The Tzemach Tzedek over there says that he recommends that the minhag should be k'moy shenoyagim poi. I guess it's Lubavitch. That the shamesh has a ring, and he gives it as a present to the husband, and then the next day he goes and he buys it from the kala. Now there's always a ring, a proper ring that you know for sure belongs to the guy, and he gives him as a present. It's not any of those things. It just points out, it's interesting to see what the minhag was back in those days. Now, since we discussed about she did not respond, there is a story in Siman Kuf Beis, also in the Tzemach Tzedek. A man got divorced, and then they tried convincing him to get back with her. She had to go to the army, and whatever. He brought Eidim. He held her hand. He put a ring onto her hand, and while he was holding the hand, he put a ring, and then he said "Et mikudeshes," and right after he let go of her hand, she pulled her hand back and threw off the ring. So he says, first says like this: the fact that she did not pull back the hand, maybe he was holding her hand tight, and she was not able to pull back the hand to show that she's not interested in the kiddushin. And that's definitely not a maisa by the mere fact she didn't pull her hand back. He says, like the way the minhag is that the girl puts her hand out, that's a maisa. She wants the ring to be put in her finger. But if he grabbed her hand and he said it, and he said Ayat Mekudeshes while he was holding her hand, it's not considered enough of a proof that this was done free willingly, and it's not a proof that she agreed to the kiddushin to the kiddushin to begin with, and it's not considered that she did not show an act of refusal because he was holding her hand tight. But what happens is, over there also, she didn't throw it the second after he let go of her hand. She threw it after the Eidim said Mekudeshes. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, first the Tzemach Tzedek says, let's go through the idea of Shsika Achar Matan Mois in a case of Kiddushin. You could say that it's a Vada Kiddushin. You could say it's Kiddushin, Vada Kiddushin Midrash. You could say Sofa Kiddushin Midrash. You could say it's Kiddushin Midrabanan. And Tzemach Tzedek brings a life from Pnei Yeshua that maybe, being that she could think, she probably thought, while this was happening, she thought, being that my hand is being held, and I'm not doing any action to show anything, so it means nothing. Why? I don't have to say no, and I'm not doing anything. Everybody, whoever sees it, sees that he's grabbing my hand. So why should why should I even be worried about it? And therefore, being that that could be the thought process that she was going through, it doesn't mean, it's not a proof that she agreed to be miskadosh. And then the Sif Zayin Tzemach Tzedek over there explains that even though Taka in the Gemara you could say that if the fact that she didn't throw it back right away, it's a raya that there is at least a chashash Kiddushin. He says, but that only applies when you have absolutely no amasla. But over here, you do. Because the fact that she didn't throw back the ring is because she was unable to throw back the ring. He was holding her hand. And after he let go of her hand, she threw it. And even if it was done, and even if you're going to believe the Eidim that she only threw the ring off her hand after the people told her, oh, you mekudeshes, mazel tov, back to your husband, those kinds of things, it's still not enough of an amasla, because over here, being that the whole original action was done by holding her hand against her will. So she thought, I don't have to do anything. She didn't do any action to show that she wants it, and she didn't have to do any action to do it. She thought, it's worthless, it's nothing. When did she realize that there was an inyan of Kiddushin? When the Eidim told her, hey, Mekudesh is mazel tov. So he says, oh, no, Mekudesh threw it off her hand. So therefore, even though she didn't throw it off the moment she received it, still not considered enough of a raya that she was doing it. And this amasla works even if it happened after Toich Kedei Dibur, from the time when the ring was put on her hand. There's a series of tshuvas, Kuf Hey, Kuf Vav, and Kuf Zayin, which discuss a story when he says that she was some lashon of Kiddushin. Then he says, he told her, and then he afterwards tells Bezin, I didn't have in mind to be Mekadosher. And she says, I didn't understand anything that he was saying anyways. And he says, Betabazu, and he gave her a coin instead of it. And between the two, which is a bunch of recitals, and Siman Kuf Zayin, which is one of the three Simanim on this topic, and Ois Gimel explains what the Shulchan Aruch says, that when you say Lashon Harei At, she's no longer trusted to say that she did not understand what was going on. It's only when everybody understands that the Lashon of Kiddushin. The fact is, maybe if everybody, not lav dafka, everybody knows that Lashon that she was saying, Hareyat Mekudesh, she understood Hareyat Mekudesh Li. And if she did understand Hareyat Mekudesh, she didn't understand Mekudesh Li. And if she did understand Mekudesh Li and Betabazu, then for sure there's no Kiddushin, because she said Betabazu and she ended up getting a coin. And even if she didn't understand and she thought maybe she was Mekudesh, ultimately she thought that she's getting back money. Based on the story over there, it was money that she thought was changed. She was supposed to get back anyways. And so she thinks she got back her own money and not as part of Kiddushin. So therefore over there he puts three or four sfeikas, and therefore he is mevatel. The Tzemach Tzedek says there's no Kiddushin in this whatsoever. So that is essentially just a few of the tshuvas of Tzemach Tzedek. There is tshuvas of Tzemach Tzedek about Li. There's tshuvas of Tzemach Tzedek about Li is relevant, and we're going to discuss it at a different time. And then once we get into Siman Chavches one of these days, then I'll just point it out to you if you want to look at it. And Siman Kuf Yud Beis and Ois Hey, Tzemach Tzedek, since it's Nogea really to Siman Chavches, about someone who is Mekadesh with money that is he got B'teiras Iske, as a Heter Iske. Is the Kiddushin fine or is not fine? And with this, we will conclude for today. Mitzvah Hashem, Wednesday afternoon, there will be another shir in Even Ezer.